The woman standing at Yates Ingram's door looked like she had walked through hell itself, and he could tell by the determined set of her jaw that she had fought every demon along the way. It was the summer of 1883 in Goldfield, Nevada, and the sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty ranch that Yates had built with his own 2 hands alongside his late wife. That had been 5 years ago now, and Alina's grave sat on the hillside overlooking the valley, a constant reminder of what he had lost. "Sir, I am looking for work," the young woman said, her voice hoarse but steady. "Any work at all. I can cook, clean, mend fences, tend animals. I am a hard worker, and I will not complain." Yates studied her carefully. She could not have been more than 23 or 24 years old, with auburn hair that fell in tangled waves past her shoulders and green eyes that held more stories than most people accumulated in a lifetime. Her dress was torn in several places, covered in dust from the trail, and her boots were worn through at the toes. But it was her eyes that caught him, held him there on his porch staring at her like a fool. There was something in those eyes, something that stirred feelings he thought had died with Alina. "Where did you come from?" he asked, leaning against the door frame. He was 31 years old, tall and lean from years of ranch work, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of whiskey. "Everywhere and nowhere," she replied. "Most recently from Carson City. Before that, California. Before that, it does not matter anymore." "You running from something, toward something, I hope." She straightened her shoulders. "I heard in town that you might need help out here. The man at the general store said you have been managing this place alone since your wife passed. That is too much work for one person." Yates felt the familiar pang at the mention of Alina, but it was duller now than it had been. Time had a way of smoothing even the sharpest edges of grief. "What is your name?" "Rose Gardner." "I am Yates Ingram. This is the Double I Ranch." He stepped aside. "Come in. You look like you could use water and a meal before we discuss anything else." Rose's eyes widened slightly, and he saw relief flood her features. "Thank you. I promise you will not regret this." She followed him into the house, and Yates was suddenly aware of how sparse and masculine the place had become since Alina's death. The curtains she had sewn still hung in the windows, but they were dusty now. The furniture was serviceable but plain. There were no flowers in vases, no decorative touches that Alina had loved. It was a house, but it had stopped being a home. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the table. He pumped water into a cup and handed it to her, then began preparing food. He had learned to cook out of necessity, though his skills were basic at best. He sliced bread, brought out cold beef from the icebox, and found some cheese that was still good. Rose drank the water like she had been crossing the desert for days. When she finished, she set the cup down carefully. "How long has it been since you had help here?" "5 years, since Alina died." The words came easier than they once had. "We were building this place together, then she got sick. Fever took her in 3 days." "I am sorry," Rose said, and the way she said it made him believe she truly understood loss. "Life keeps moving forward whether we are ready or not." He set the plate of food in front of her. "Eat, then tell me your story." Rose did not need to be told twice. She ate with the controlled desperation of someone who had gone hungry too often, trying to maintain dignity while her body screamed for sustenance. Yates watched her and felt something shift in his chest, something he could not quite name. When she had finished, Rose folded her hands on the table. "I was married," she said quietly. "His name was Thomas Gardner. He was a good man, or I thought he was. We lived in San Francisco. He worked at the docks, and I kept our small home. Then the economy collapsed for so many people, and he started drinking. The drinking led to gambling. The gambling led to debts with very bad men." She paused, and Yates could see her gathering her courage to continue. One night he came home beaten nearly to death. He told me we had to run, so we did. We made it as far as Sacramento before they caught up with us. There was a fight. Thomas was killed. Her voice remained steady, but her hands trembled slightly. I ran. I have been running for 6 months now, taking whatever work I could find, never staying long anywhere, but I am tired of running. I want to build a life somewhere, start over. Those men still looking for you? I do not know. Maybe. Probably not this far out. Thomas owed them money, not me, but I cannot be sure. Yates considered this. He should send her away. Taking in a woman who might have dangerous men looking for her was foolish, but when he looked at Rose, he saw something beyond the risk. He saw possibility. "Can you really mend fences?" he asked. Hope flickered in her eyes. "I can learn. I am strong and I follow directions." "Can you handle a rifle?" "Yes. My father taught me when I was young before he died. The work here is hard. I wake before dawn and sometimes do not stop until well after dark. The ranch is not big, but it is just me managing cattle, horses, crops, repairs, everything. I am not afraid of hard work." Yates made his decision. "The bunkhouse is empty. You can stay there. I will pay you fair wages and provide meals. We will try this for a month and see how it goes." Rose stood up so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. "Thank you. You will not regret this, Mr. Ingram. I swear it." "Just Yates," he said. "We do not stand on formality out here." "Yates," she repeated, and he liked the way his name sounded in her voice. That first night, after he had shown Rose to the bunkhouse and made sure she had blankets and everything she needed, Yates lay in his bed staring at the ceiling. He had not felt this particular sensation in 5 years, this awareness of another person's presence on his land, in his space. But it was more than that. When he had looked into Rose's eyes on his porch, for just a moment, he had seen something, a flash of a possible future, a life that could be. It had startled him so thoroughly that he had almost sent her away. Eleanor would have laughed at him for being so fanciful. She had been practical, down to earth, always focused on the work at hand rather than dreams and possibilities. He had loved that about her, but Rose was different. Rose carried determination like a weapon, and in her eyes, he saw not just survival but the fierce will to thrive. The next morning, Yates woke to find Rose already up, standing in his kitchen with a bewildered expression as she surveyed his sparse supplies. "I was trying to make breakfast to thank you," she said, "but your stores are rather limited." He had to smile at that. "I keep it simple. Eggs when the chickens cooperate, bacon, bread. When was the last time you had a proper meal? Vegetables, something green, a decent stew." Yates thought about it. "Eleanor used to make a stew I liked. So 5 years ago, I get by." Rose shook her head. "Not anymore. Give me a list of what you need from town and some money to purchase it. I will cook properly if you give me the means to do so. I hired you to help with ranch work. A man cannot do ranch work if he is poorly fed. Besides, I can do both." There was no arguing with her logic, and truthfully, Yates had no desire to argue. He gave her money and a list, and after breakfast they rode together into Goldfield. The town was small but growing, fueled by mining operations in the surrounding hills. The main street had a general store, a saloon, a church, a doctor's office, and various other establishments needed for frontier life. At the general store, Rose moved through the aisles with purpose, selecting vegetables, proper cuts of meat, flour, sugar, spices, and other supplies. The shopkeeper, an older man named Martin who had known Yates for years, watched with undisguised curiosity. "Got yourself some help, Yates?" Martin asked as Rose continued shopping. "Hired a hand to help around the ranch. Mighty pretty hand." Martin's tone was neutral, but Yates heard the question underneath. "Mind your business, Martin. Town will talk regardless." Town always talks. Yates loaded the supplies Rose brought to the counter. If anyone asks, she is my employee working for fair wages. That is all they need to know. When they returned to the ranch, Yates showed Rose the full extent of the property. They had 200 acres, much of it good grazing land. He kept about 50 head of cattle and a dozen horses, including 2 breeding mares. There were crops too, mainly hay for the animals, but also a kitchen garden that had gone to weeds. Alina planted that garden, Yates said, looking at the overgrown plot. I could not bring myself to tend it after she died. Rose knelt beside the garden, pulling at the weeds with her hands. It can be saved. Look, there are still some perennials here trying to survive. We could clear this out, plant new vegetables for the fall harvest. The word slipped out before he could stop it. She looked up at him, shading her eyes against the sun. Is that not why I am here, to help? Yes, he said. Yes, it is. They worked together for the rest of that day. Rose proved herself capable and uncomplaining. She learned quickly how to mend the fence that kept the cattle contained, how to check the horses for any injuries or problems, how to fill the water troughs. When evening came, she made dinner, a proper stew with beef and vegetables and herbs that filled the house with smells Yates had forgotten existed. They ate together at his table, and it felt strange and right all at once. Tell me about Alina, Rose said suddenly. Yates paused, his spoon halfway to his mouth. Why? Because she was important to you, because her presence is still here. If I am going to live here and work here, I should know about her. He set his spoon down. We met in Utah. I was working on a cattle drive, and her father owned the ranch where we stopped. She was 19 and I was 24. We talked for one evening and I just knew. He smiled at the memory. I came back 6 months later and asked her to marry me. We moved here, bought this land, built this house together. We had 3 good years. Then she got sick. Do you still love her? The question was bold, perhaps too bold, but Yates appreciated the directness. I will always love what we had, but I am not the same man I was when she died. Grief changes you. Time changes you. I honor her memory, but I do not live in the past. Rose nodded, seeming satisfied with that answer. She chose well. This is a good place you built. We built it together. And now you are building it alone. She met his eyes across the table. That must be lonely. Yes, he admitted. It is. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding, a recognition of shared loneliness and shared loss. Yates felt it like a physical thing, a thread connecting them. The days turned into weeks, and Rose settled into life on the Double I Ranch. She proved herself invaluable, working from dawn until dusk without complaint. She could mend fences as well as any cowhand, could gentle a nervous horse with patient hands, could shoot straight when coyotes threatened the livestock. She also transformed the house, bit by bit, cleaning and organizing without overstepping, adding small touches that made it feel lived in again. The garden came back to life under her care, producing tomatoes and squash and beans. She cooked meals that reminded Yates food could be more than just fuel. She hummed while she worked, old songs he did not recognize, and the sound filled the empty spaces of the ranch. Yates caught himself watching her more and more often. The way she pushed her hair back from her face when she was concentrating. The way she laughed when one of the horses nuzzled her for treats. The way the setting sun turned her auburn hair to fire. He tried to tell himself it was just appreciation for a good worker, but he knew he was lying to himself. One evening in August, about 6 weeks after Rose had arrived, a storm rolled in fast and fierce. Yates and Rose had been working to secure everything when the sky opened up. They ran for the house, but both were soaked through by the time they made it inside. Rose was laughing, water streaming down her face. I have not been caught in rain like that in years." Yates found himself laughing too, something he had not done nearly enough of lately. "Go get dried off. I will start a fire to chase the chill." She disappeared into the room he had given her, the spare bedroom that had once been intended for a child that never came. When she returned, she had changed into a dry dress, her hair loose and damp around her shoulders. The fire was crackling now, pushing back the storm's chill. "Yates," she said, and something in her tone made him turn from the fire. "I need to tell you something." His stomach tightened. "What is it?" "I have not been entirely honest with you." She twisted her hands together. "About why I came here. Tell me." "I was in Carson City looking for work, and I overheard some men talking in a saloon. They were discussing this area about ranches and opportunities. One of them mentioned you by name. He said the widow on the Double I Ranch was struggling alone, could probably use help." She paused. "He also said you were a good man, honest, fair, the kind of person who would give someone a chance, so I came here specifically. I came looking for you." Yates processed this. "You came here knowing who I was, knowing of you. I did not know you, not really, but I hoped what they said was true, and it was." She met his eyes. "I am sorry I was not upfront about that from the beginning. I was afraid you would turn me away if you knew I had sought you out deliberately." "Why tell me now?" "Because I am tired of running, tired of hiding parts of the truth. If I am going to stay here, if I am going to build something real, it has to be built on honesty." He walked closer to her, watching emotions play across her face. Fear, hope, determination. "Are you asking to stay beyond the month we agreed on?" "I am asking if you want me to stay." It was the most honest question anyone had asked him in 5 years. Yates reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a damp strand of hair from her face. "Yes," he said quietly. "I want you to stay." Rose let out a breath she seemed to have been holding. "Good, because I want to stay too." They stood there, close enough that Yates could see the gold flecks in her green eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from her. He was acutely aware of every reason he should step back, maintain proper distance. She worked for him. She had been through trauma. It had only been 6 weeks, but none of those reasons seemed to matter when he looked at her. "Rose," he said, his voice rough, "I need you to know something too." "What?" "When you knocked on my door that first day, I looked at you and I saw my future. Just for a second, but I saw it. Saw a life we could build together. I tried to tell myself I was being foolish, that it was too soon, too fast. But the feeling has not gone away. It has only gotten stronger." Her eyes widened. "I saw something too. That is part of why I was so desperate for you to give me a chance. I looked at you and felt safe for the first time in months, felt like I could finally stop running." "What do we do with that?" he asked. "We could be smart and careful and take our time," she said. "Or we could be honest about what we both feel." "And what do you feel?" Rose reached up and placed her hand against his chest, over his heart. "I feel like I have been walking toward you my whole life. Like every bad thing that happened led me exactly where I was supposed to be." Yates covered her hand with his own. "I loved my wife, I will not pretend otherwise, but what I am feeling for you, it is not less because of what I felt before. It is different, new, but just as real. I am not asking you to forget her, I would never ask that. I know." He drew her closer. "Rose Gardner, I think I am falling in love with you. I know it is fast and probably foolish, but it is the truth." She smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through storm clouds. "Yates Ingram, I am falling in love with you too. And maybe it is fast, but my grandmother used to say that when you know, you know." She met my grandfather and married him 3 weeks later. They had 50 happy years together. 3 weeks. We have been practically cautious in comparison. Rose laughed, and then Yates was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and the storm raged outside while inside. Something new and precious was being born. They took their time after that, letting their relationship develop naturally alongside their work partnership. Yates continued to sleep in his room and Rose in hers, both of them determined to do this properly. But they courted in the evenings, talking for hours about everything and nothing. Rose told him about her childhood in Illinois, her parents who had died when she was young, her journey west. Yates shared stories about his early years, about building the ranch with Alina, about his dreams for the future. "I always wanted children," he admitted one night as they sat on the porch watching the stars. "Alina did too, but it never happened for us. I thought maybe that dream had passed me by." "Maybe it has not," Rose said softly, her hand finding his. The town of Goldfield took notice of their relationship, of course. Some people whispered that it was scandalous, a woman living on a man's property unchaperoned. But more people saw what Yates saw. Two people who had found each other against odds and were building something good. The local preacher, Reverend Samuel Morrison, visited the ranch in September. He was a kind man in his 50s who had presided over Alina's funeral and checked on Yates regularly in the years since. "I am not here to judge," Reverend Morrison said as they sat at the kitchen table with coffee. "I am here as a friend. Tell me what your intentions are, Yates." "I intend to marry her if she will have me. I was planning to propose soon, actually. I have been saving up for a ring." The Reverend smiled. "I thought as much. You both look at each other the way people in love look. I just wanted to make sure you were thinking clearly, not rushing into something out of loneliness." "I am not lonely anymore, and that is exactly because of Rose. But this is not about filling a void. It is about wanting to build a life with her specifically, because of who she is." "That is what I hope to hear. You have my blessing, for what it is worth." "It is worth a lot. Thank you." Yates proposed on a cool October evening. He had purchased a simple gold band with a small emerald that reminded him of Rose's eyes. They had ridden out to check on the cattle in the far pasture, and the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. "Rose," he said, dismounting from his horse, "come here a moment." She joined him, and he took both her hands in his. "I practiced a speech," he said. "But now all I can think is that life is short and uncertain, and I do not want to waste a single day of it without you by my side. I want to wake up with you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to build this ranch into something even bigger together. I want children with you if we are blessed with them. I want to grow old with you." He pulled out the ring. "Rose Gardner, will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face, catching the last light of the setting sun. "Yes. Yes. Absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she threw her arms around him, and they stood there in the middle of the pasture as the sky darkened and the first stars appeared. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Goldfield. Rose wore a simple white dress that the seamstress in town had helped her make. Yates wore his best suit, one he had not worn since Alina's funeral, now brushed clean and mended. The ceremony was small, attended by the few friends Yates had made in the area, and some of the townspeople who had grown fond of Rose during her trips into Goldfield. As Yates spoke his vows, looking into Rose's eyes, he felt Alina's presence not as a ghost or a burden, but as a blessing. She had taught him how to love, how to build a life with someone. That gift did not disappear when she died. It had prepared him to love again, to build again. "I promise to stand by your side through whatever comes," he said. "To work with you, laugh with you, cry with you. To build a future worthy of the journey that brought us together." Rose's vows were equally heartfelt. "I promise to make this house a home, to work beside you every day, to love you with everything I have. You gave me a chance when I had nothing, and I will spend my life proving that your faith was not misplaced." Reverend Morrison pronounced them husband and wife, and when Yates kissed his bride, the small congregation cheered. The reception was held at the ranch. Neighbors brought food and drink, and there was music and dancing. Yates had not realized how isolated he had become until he saw his home filled with people celebrating. Martin from the general store played the fiddle, and couples danced on the porch and in the yard. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Ingram?" Yates asked, extending his hand to Rose. "Always, Mr. Ingram," she replied with a smile that made his heart race. They danced as the sun set, and Yates thought about the day Rose had appeared at his door, desperate and determined. He thought about the flash of future he had seen in her eyes. That future was now his present, and it was more beautiful than he had imagined. That night, after all the guests had left, Yates carried Rose across the threshold of their bedroom. It was no longer his room or the room where he had slept alone for 5 years. It was theirs now, a space they would share, where they would build their intimacy and their life together. "Are you happy?" he asked as they lay together later, her head on his chest, his arms around her. "Happier than I knew was possible," Rose said. "After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over. I thought I would spend the rest of my days alone, just surviving. But then I found you. I found you too." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for being brave enough to knock on my door. Thank you for being brave enough to let me in." The next months were a period of deep contentment for both of them. They fell into rhythms together, working the ranch as partners. Rose's touches had transformed the house completely. Curtains she had sewn hung in the windows, letting in light while providing privacy. Wildflowers she picked sat in vases on the table. The kitchen was organized and well-stocked. The garden flourished under her care, but it was more than just physical changes. There was laughter in the house again, conversation, life. When winter came and the work slowed, they spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other, making plans for the spring, simply enjoying each other's presence. "I want to expand the herd next year," Yates said one evening. "If we could get it up to 100 head, we could really turn a good profit." "We would need more grazing land," Rose mused. "What about the Hendricks property to the east? I heard Mrs. Hendricks say at church that they were thinking of moving back east to be near their daughter." "That is a good thought. I will talk to them." This was what partnership meant, Yates realized. Two minds working toward common goals, supporting and building on each other's ideas. In February, Rose fainted while hanging laundry. Yates found her on the ground and his heart nearly stopped. He carried her inside, sent for the doctor in town, and spent the next hour pacing anxiously until Doc Stevens arrived. After examining Rose, Doc Stevens emerged from the bedroom with a smile. "Congratulations, Yates. Your wife is with child. About 2 months along, I would say." Yates felt his knees go weak with relief and joy. "She is going to be all right. She is perfectly healthy. The fainting is normal, especially in the early months. Make sure she is eating enough and not overworking herself. But yes, she is fine. So is the baby." When the doctor left, Yates went to their bedroom. Rose was sitting up, her hand on her stomach, tears on her cheeks. "I thought maybe I could not," she said. "Thomas and I tried for 2 years and nothing happened. I thought maybe I could not have children." Yates sat beside her and pulled her into his arms. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Happy, Rose, I am beyond happy. I am overjoyed." He placed his hand over hers on her stomach. "This is everything I hoped for." They prepared for the baby's arrival with excitement and some trepidation. Yates finished the room that would be the nursery, painting it and building a cradle with his own hands. Rose sewed tiny clothes and blankets. They discussed names endlessly. "If it is a boy, I want to name him James, after my father," Rose said. "James Ingram, I like that. And if it is a girl, maybe Eleanor." "To honor your first wife." Yates was touched by the offer, but he shook his head. "No, Eleanor had her own story, and I will always remember her. But this child is ours, part of our story. Let us choose a name that is just ours." "What about Sarah? I always loved that name." "Sarah Ingram. That is perfect." As Rose's belly grew through the spring and summer, Yates found himself falling even more deeply in love with his wife. She was radiant with pregnancy, glowing with health and happiness. She continued to help with lighter ranch work, refusing to be treated as fragile, though Yates did his best to take on the heavier tasks. The baby came in early September of 1884, a year and 3 months after Rose had first knocked on Yates's door. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Yates stayed by Rose's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, offering what comfort he could. Finally, as the sun reached its peak, the baby arrived. Not Sarah, but James. A son. The midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Thompson, cleaned and wrapped the baby, then placed him in Rose's arms. "You have a beautiful, healthy boy," she announced. Yates looked at his son, his eyes filled with tears. The baby had a shock of dark hair like his own and Rose's green eyes. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. "Hello, James," Rose whispered, exhausted but radiant. "We have been waiting for you." Yates kissed his wife's forehead, then gently touched his son's tiny hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his own, and Yates felt his heart expand with a love he had never experienced before. "Thank you," he said to Rose. "Thank you for this, for him, for all of it." "We did this together," she replied. "Everything we do together." The first months of James's life were exhausting and wonderful. Yates had never been so tired or so happy. He would wake in the night to help with feedings, walking the floor with his son when the baby fussed, singing old cowboy songs he remembered from his youth. Rose was a natural mother, patient and loving. She managed to care for James, help with the ranch work, and keep the household running. Yates often marveled at her strength and capability. "I do not know how you do it all," he said one evening, watching her nurse the baby while also mending one of his shirts. "The same way we do everything else, one thing at a time together." When James was 6 months old, Yates completed the purchase of the Hendricks property. The ranch now encompassed 300 acres, and they increased the herd to 90 head of cattle. They hired a young ranch hand named Pete to help with the increased workload. Pete was 17, hardworking and eager to learn. He bunked in the old bunkhouse where Rose had stayed when she first arrived. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. James grew from a baby into a toddler, learning to walk and then to run, keeping both his parents constantly on their toes. He had his mother's curiosity and his father's determination, a combination that led him into all sorts of mischief. In the spring of 1887, Rose told Yates she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and Rose seemed to sail through it with energy and good humor. "This one is going to be a girl," she announced confidently. "I just know it." "How can you possibly know that? Women know these things. You will see." Rose was right. In December of 1887, Sarah Ingram was born, a tiny, delicate girl with auburn hair like her mother. James, now 3 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her. "Gentle," Rose would remind him as he stroked Sarah's head with pudgy fingers. "She is very small." "I will protect her," James declared solemnly, and Yates had to turn away to hide his smile. The ranch continued to prosper. By 1890, they had expanded to 400 acres and 120 head of cattle. They had also started breeding horses more seriously, developing a reputation for quality animals. The Double I Ranch was now one of the most successful operations in the region. Yates was 40 years old, Rose 30, and they had built something remarkable together. The house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. The land was productive and well managed. Their children were healthy and happy. It was everything Yates had dreamed of during those lonely years after Alina's death. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching James and Sarah play in the yard under the setting sun, Rose leaned her head on Yates's shoulder. "You ever think about that day I showed up at your door?" she asked. "I think about it often. How different my life would be if you had not been brave enough to ask for work, or if you had not been kind enough to say yes." She turned to look at him. "I was so desperate that day. I felt like I had reached the end of everything. And then you opened that door and I looked at you, and I knew somehow that everything was going to be all right. I saw my future in your eyes," Yates said softly. "I thought I was being foolish, but it turned out to be the truest thing I have ever known." "I love you," Rose said. "I love the life we have built, the children we are raising, the partnership we have. I love waking up next to you every morning and working beside you every day. I love you too. You saved me, Rose. I was just existing before you came. You taught me how to live again." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children play. James was teaching Sarah how to catch fireflies, and her delighted laughter rang out across the yard. "What do you think the future holds for us?" Rose asked. Yates considered this. "More hard work, more good years. Maybe more children if we are blessed. Growing old together, watching James and Sarah grow up and build their own lives." "That sounds perfect." "It does not it?" In 1893, Rose gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Michael. James was now 9 and took his role as big brother seriously, helping with both Sarah and the new baby. Sarah, at 5, was energetic and curious, constantly asking questions about everything. The house was loud and chaotic and full of love. Yates sometimes had to escape to the barn just for a moment of quiet, but he would not have traded the chaos for anything. One day in the summer of 1895, a stranger rode up to the ranch. Yates was in the corral working with a young horse when he saw the man approaching. Something about the way the man carried himself set off warning bells in Yates's mind. "Can I help you?" Yates called out, walking to meet the stranger. The man was in his 40s, well-dressed with hard eyes. "I am looking for Rose Gardner. I heard she might be in this area." Yates's hand moved instinctively closer to the rifle he kept near the corral. "Who is asking?" "Name's Marcus Shaw. I worked with her late husband Thomas in San Francisco. I heard she might have come this way." "That was 12 years ago. Why are you looking for her now?" Shaw dismounted. "Just tying up some old business. So you do know her?" "I know of someone by that name who lived in the area years ago. Moved on, far as I know." It was a lie, but Yates had no intention of confirming Rose's presence to this man who felt dangerous. Shaw studied Yates carefully. "That is interesting, because I heard she married a rancher named Yates Ingram. That would not be you, would it?" Before Yates could answer, Rose emerged from the house. She froze when she saw Shaw, and Yates saw fear flash across her face before she controlled it. "Marcus," she said, walking toward them. "It has been a long time." "Hello, Rose, or should I say Mrs. Ingram?" Shaw's smile did not reach his eyes. Yates moved to stand beside his wife. "Whatever you want, say it and then leave. My wife has nothing to do with her first husband's debts." "Debts?" Shaw laughed. "Is that what she told you? That Thomas owed money?" Rose's face had gone pale. "What are you doing here, Marcus? I think you know. I have been looking for you for a very long time, Rose. Took me years to track you down to this God-forsaken corner of Nevada." Yates felt Rose trembling beside him. He put his arm around her. "Whatever happened in the past stays in the past. My wife has built a new life here. Leave her alone." Shaw's expression hardened. "Thomas did not owe money, Mr. Ingram. Thomas stole money. A lot of it from the men we worked for. Very dangerous men. And when he ran, we assumed Rose helped him, maybe even planned it with him." "I did not know," Rose said, her voice shaking. "I swear, Marcus, I did not know until the night he came home and said we had to run. He told me he had gambling debts. I believed him." "Maybe that is true, maybe it is not. Either way, the money never turned up. Thomas died with that secret." Shaw looked at Rose intently. "I am hoping you know where it is." "I do not. I never knew anything about any money. Thomas kept that from me." "You expect me to believe that?" "Believe what you want," Yates said firmly. "But you are on my property and I am telling you to leave. Now." Shaw's hand moved toward his gun, and Yates's hand closed around the rifle he had been gradually moving closer to. "I would not do that if I were you," Yates said calmly. "You would be dead before you cleared leather." For a long moment, the three of them stood frozen. Then Shaw slowly moved his hand away from his gun. "This is not over," Shaw said. "Those men I worked for, they want their money. They do not forget and they do not forgive." "Then tell them to come talk to me," Yates said. "My wife does not have their money, does not know where it is, and had nothing to do with stealing it. If they have a problem with that, they can take it up with me." Big talk for a rancher. "I spent my younger years as a lawman in Utah before I came to Nevada. I know how to handle myself, and I am not afraid of criminals from San Francisco. Now get off my land." Shaw mounted his horse, but before he rode away, he looked at Rose. "You built a nice life here. Shame if something happened to it." After he left, Rose collapsed against Yates, shaking. "I am so sorry. I thought that part of my life was dead and buried. I never knew about any stolen money." "I believe you." Yates held her tight. "But we need to be prepared. Men like that do not give up easily." That night, after the children were asleep, Yates and Rose talked seriously about what to do. They agreed that Yates would ride into Goldfield the next day and speak with the local marshal, a man named Dutch Holloway, who Yates trusted. Marshal Holloway listened to the story and nodded gravely. "I will send some telegrams, make inquiries in San Francisco. If these men are who I think they are part of a criminal organization that has been causing trouble up and down the coast. But here is the thing, Yates. You are right that they do not give up easily. If they think your wife knows something, they might come after her. What do you suggest? Be vigilant. Keep weapons close. Maybe hire some more hands, men who can handle themselves in a fight. And trust me to work through official channels to get these men off your back." Yates took the marshal's advice. He hired 2 more ranch hands, both older men with experience. He made sure Rose knew where all the weapons were kept and reminded her how to shoot. He taught James, now 11, how to use a rifle properly, though he hated having to burden his son with such knowledge. For 2 weeks, they lived in a state of heightened alert. Then Marshal Holloway rode out to the ranch with news. "The men Marcus Shaw works for are indeed a criminal organization in San Francisco," Holloway explained. "But I spoke with some federal marshals who have been investigating them. Turns out, Thomas Gardner was never a thief. He was actually working with federal authorities, gathering evidence against these criminals. They found out and killed him. They have been looking for Rose because they thought maybe he passed evidence to her before he died." Rose's hand flew to her mouth. "Thomas was helping the law." "According to my sources, yes. He was trying to make up for some youthful mistakes by turning informant. The money they think he stole never existed. It was just a story they told to justify hunting him down." Holloway paused. "The good news is that most of that organization has now been arrested." Shaw and a few others are still at large, but they are being actively hunted. I do not think they will risk coming after you again, Rose. It would draw too much attention to themselves." The relief Yates felt was overwhelming. He pulled Rose into his arms and she began to cry, all the tension and fear of the past weeks finally released. "It is over," Yates murmured. "It is finally over." "Thomas was a good man after all," Rose said through her tears. "He was trying to do the right thing. I am sorry I ever doubted him." "You had every reason to doubt, based on what you knew," Holloway said kindly. "But you can rest easy now. That chapter of your life is closed for good." After the marshal left, Yates and Rose stood on their porch looking out at their land, their home, their life. "I was so afraid I was going to lose this," Rose said. "Lose you, lose our children, lose everything we built." "You never could have lost me," Yates said firmly. "We face things together, remember? That is what we promised each other." "Together," Rose echoed and smiled. Life returned to normal after that. The threat that had loomed over Rose for so many years was finally gone. She seemed lighter somehow, freer, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The years passed peacefully. James grew into a strong, capable young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. Sarah was bright and spirited, with her mother's determination and her father's steady nature. Michael was quiet and thoughtful, with a gift for working with animals. In 1899, when Yates was 50 and Rose 39, their fourth child was born, a surprise baby they named Eleanor. This time, Yates had suggested the name himself. "I think it is time," he said to Rose when they discussed names. "Eleanor was part of my journey to you. Without that chapter of my life, I would not have been the man you needed when you knocked on my door. I want to honor that." Rose agreed, and little Eleanor was welcomed into their family with love. The turn of the century found the Ingram family thriving. James was 17 now, already managing much of the day-to-day ranch operations. He had his eye on expanding into cattle breeding programs. Sarah, at 12, was excelling in her studies and talking about becoming a teacher. Michael, at 8, spent every free moment with the horses. And Eleanor was a toddler, charming everyone she met. Yates and Rose often sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over their land, holding hands like they had been doing for nearly 2 decades. "We built something good here," Yates said one evening. "We did," Rose agreed. "From nothing but hope and determination and love, we built all of this. Do you ever regret it? The hard work, the struggles, the scares?" "Never, not for a single moment." She squeezed his hand. "Every challenge was worth it to get to this life with you." James married in 1902 to a lovely young woman named Catherine from a neighboring ranch. They built a house on the eastern edge of the Double I property, and James continued to work the ranch alongside his father. A year later, James and Catherine had a son, making Yates and Rose grandparents for the first time. "I cannot believe we are old enough to be grandparents," Rose said, cradling her grandson. "Speak for yourself," Yates teased. "I am as young as I ever was. Your gray hair says otherwise." "Distinguished, not gray." Rose laughed, and the sound still made Yates's heart skip a beat after all these years. Sarah did indeed become a teacher, opening a small schoolhouse in Goldfield where she taught children from the surrounding ranches and farms. Michael took over the horse breeding program, developing a true talent for it. And little Eleanor grew up surrounded by love, the cherished youngest child of parents who had built their love story from scratch. In 1910, Yates was 58 and Rose was 49. They had been married for 26 years. The ranch was now run primarily by James and Michael, though Yates still helped with the work he loved. Rose had handed over most of the household management to Catherine, though she still cooked the family's favorite meals and tended her beloved garden. One evening, as they sat on their porch in the spot that had become their tradition, Rose said, "Do you remember the first thing you said to me when I knocked on your door? I asked where you came from. And I said everywhere and nowhere." She smiled. "But really, I was coming from a life of running and fear, and I was heading toward you, toward home. You gave me back my life," Yates said. "I was existing, going through motions. You reminded me what it meant to truly live. We saved each other, I think." "Yes," Yates agreed. "We did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. In the distance, they could see James and Catherine's house, smoke rising from the chimney. Sarah was visiting with her beau, a young rancher who Yates approved of. Michael was in the barn with the horses, where he was happiest. Eleanor was inside, practicing the piano that Rose had insisted they buy. "This is what I saw that first day," Yates said suddenly, "when you were standing at my door, desperate and determined. I saw this. Not specifically, but the feeling of it, completeness, family, love, home." "I saw the same thing," Rose said softly. "I saw safety and strength and possibility. I saw a man who could help me become who I was meant to be." "And did you become who you were meant to be?" Rose considered this, looking out at the land they had built together, the family they had created, the life they had carved from nothing but faith and hard work. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, I did. And I did it with you by my side every step of the way." Yates brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "Here is to every step ahead, too. Whatever comes, we face it together." "Together," Rose echoed. "Always together." As the sun set on another day at the Double I Ranch, Yates Ingram looked at his wife, his partner, his love, and knew that every moment of struggle and doubt and fear had been worth it to get to this place. Rose had knocked on his door begging for work, and he had seen his future in her eyes. That future had become more beautiful than he could have imagined. They had built a legacy that would outlast them both, in the land they had cultivated, the children they had raised, the love they had nurtured through good times and bad. The Double I Ranch stood as a testament to what was possible when two people chose each other, chose to work together, chose to build rather than simply exist. And every evening, as long as they both lived, they would sit on that porch holding hands, watching the sun set over the life they had created, grateful for the day a desperate woman had knocked on a widowed cowboy's door, and both of them had been brave enough to see the possibility in each other's eyes. The years continued to unfold with grace and purpose. In 1912, Sarah married her rancher beau, Thomas Wright, in a beautiful ceremony at the church in Goldfield. The whole town turned out to celebrate, a testament to how respected the Ingram family had become in the community. Yates walked his daughter down the aisle with pride, remembering the little girl who had asked endless questions and dreamed of teaching. Now she was a woman starting her own journey. Michael, at 24, had expanded the horse breeding operation significantly. The Double I horses were now known throughout Nevada and into California for their quality and temperament. He had also quietly begun courting a young woman named Anna, daughter of a mine owner in town. Rose had noticed before Michael even said anything, recognizing the same look in her son's eyes that Yates had once carried when looking at her. Eleanor, at 13, was growing into a remarkable young woman. She had inherited her mother's auburn hair and her father's whiskey-colored eyes, a striking combination that turned heads. But more than her looks, she had inherited their strength and determination. She talked about studying medicine, wanting to become a doctor, which was an unusual ambition for a woman but one that both Yates and Rose encouraged. "The world is changing," Rose said, when some of the more traditional townspeople expressed shock at Aliner's ambitions. Women are finding their voices, pursuing their dreams. I want my daughter to be part of that change. James and Catherine now had 3 children of their own, 2 boys and a girl, who filled the ranch with noise and laughter. Yates loved being a grandfather, loved teaching his grandchildren about the land and the animals, passing down knowledge just as it had been passed to him. In the summer of 1914, tragedy struck when a telegram arrived with devastating news. Sarah's husband, Thomas, had been killed in an accident at his ranch, crushed when a horse spooked and knocked a beam down on him. Sarah was left a widow at 29, with a baby daughter. Rose and Yates immediately brought Sarah and their granddaughter home to the Double I Ranch. Sarah was devastated, lost in grief that Rose understood all too well. "I know what you are feeling," Rose said one night, holding her daughter as she cried. "I know how the world seems like it has ended, but I also know that life continues, even when we do not think we can take another step. You will survive this. We will help you survive this." "Did you ever stop loving your first husband?" Sarah asked. "After he died, after you married Papa, did you forget about Thomas?" "I did not forget him, no. The love I had for him was real, even though our time together was marked by struggle and fear at the end. But loving your father did not diminish what I felt for Thomas. Love does not work that way. Your heart has room for all of it." Rose brushed her daughter's hair back. "Someday, maybe you will love again. Or maybe you will not. Either way is fine. What matters is that you keep living for yourself and for your daughter." Sarah stayed at the ranch for a year, slowly healing. When she finally felt ready, she returned to teaching, throwing herself into her work and raising her daughter with the support of her family always nearby. The First World War touched their lives peripherally. They were far from the fighting, but they felt its effects nonetheless. Food prices fluctuated wildly. Some of the young men from Goldfield enlisted and never came home. The world seemed less stable, less certain than it had been, but the Double I Ranch remained a constant, a place of stability and family. Yates was now in his 60s, Rose in her 50s. They had slowed down somewhat, but they were still active, still involved in the daily life of the ranch. Michael married Anna in 1916, and they moved into a newly built house on the western edge of the property. The Double I Ranch was now home to 3 generations of Ingrams, all working together to keep it thriving. Aliner finished her schooling in Goldfield and shocked everyone by being accepted to study at a women's medical college in California. The day she left, Rose cried, but they were tears of pride as much as sadness. "I am terrified," Aliner admitted as they said their goodbyes at the train station. "I will be so far from home in a world I do not know." "You come from people who rebuilt their lives from nothing," Yates told his youngest daughter. "You have your mother's courage and determination. You will not just succeed, you will excel." "And we will be here," Rose added. "Always. This will always be your home to return to." Aliner did excel. She wrote letters regularly, telling them about her studies, her experiences, the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated field. Yates and Rose read every letter multiple times, sharing them with the rest of the family, bursting with pride at their daughter's achievements. In 1920, James approached his parents with a proposition. He was now 36, managing most of the ranch operations. He wanted to officially take over as owner, with his parents retaining a portion and a house on the property for as long as they lived. "You built this place," James said. "You and Mother. But I have been running it for years now, and I have my own ideas for the future. I think it is time to make it official." Yates looked at Rose, and they had a whole conversation without words, the way couples did after decades together. "On one condition," Rose said. The name stays the Double I Ranch. That was your father's name, his identity on this land. Whatever you do with it, that name remains. I would not dream of changing it, James assured them. This ranch is our family's legacy. I am just the next steward. The transition happened smoothly. Yates and Rose moved into a smaller, comfortable house that James had built for them closer to the main road. It had a large porch, of course, where they could continue their evening tradition of watching the sun set. "How does it feel?" Rose asked on their first evening in the new house. "Letting go of the ranch, like the natural progression of things," Yates said. "We built it, we grew it, and now we are passing it on to the next generation. That was always the goal." "I suppose you are right. It is strange, though, after nearly 40 years of waking up in that house. This is a good house, too, and we are still here, still on our land, still together. That is what matters." Rose leaned her head on his shoulder. "You are right. As long as we are together, we are home." Alina returned from medical school in 1922, now Dr. Alina Ingram. She set up a small practice in Goldfield, becoming the first female doctor in the area. Many people were skeptical at first, but Alina's skill and compassion quickly won people over. Sarah had found love again, marrying a widower named Robert Fleming who owned a small ranch near town. They blended their families, her daughter finding siblings in his 2 children. Watching Sarah smile again, truly smile, healed something in Rose's heart that had hurt since Thomas Wright's death. Michael and Anna had twins in 1923, a boy and a girl, bringing even more life to the growing Ingram clan. Yates turned 70 in 1922, Rose 60 in 1923. They were slower now, their hair completely gray, their hands marked by decades of hard work. But they were healthy and happy, surrounded by family, living in the land they loved. "You ever think about that day I showed up at your door?" Rose asked one evening, as they had asked each other many times over the years. It had become something of a ritual between them, remembering their beginning. "Every day," Yates said. "I think about how close I came to turning you away, how different everything would be if I had. But you did not turn me away. You saw something in me worth taking a chance on. I saw my future, and I was right." They sat in comfortable silence, holding hands as they had for nearly 40 years. Around them, the ranch hummed with life. Children's laughter echoed from James's house. Lights glowed in Michael's windows. The horses nickered softly in the barn. Cattle lowed in the distance. "We built something remarkable," Rose said softly. "Not just the ranch, but the family, the legacy." "We did it together," Yates reminded her. "Every step of the way." "Together," Rose agreed, smiling. "That has always been our secret. We faced everything together." In 1925, the family threw a grand celebration for Yates and Rose's 40th wedding anniversary. Nearly 200 people attended, a testament to the lives they had touched. The party was held at the main ranch house, now James and Catherine's home, with tables set up outside under the stars. All of their children were there, all of their grandchildren. Friends from town, neighboring ranchers, people whose lives had intersected with theirs over 4 decades in Nevada. Reverend Morrison, now ancient and retired, said a blessing. Martin from the general store, who had questioned Yates about Rose all those years ago, toasted their enduring love. 40 years ago," Yates said when called upon to speak, "a woman knocked on my door begging for work. I opened that door and saw my entire future standing there, though I did not fully understand it at the time." He looked at Rose, his eyes full of love. "You saved my life, Rose. You brought me back from a dark place and gave me a reason to truly live again. Everything we built together. Every challenge we faced together, and I would not change a single moment of it." Rose wiped tears from her eyes as she stood beside him. Yates gave me a chance when I had nothing. He saw past my desperation to who I could be. He believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. He taught me that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every single day. And every day for 40 years, I have chosen him, as he has chosen me. The celebration lasted late into the night, with music and dancing and stories. Yates managed to dance with Rose, moving slowly but surely to a waltz that the fiddle players performed. "I love you," he whispered as they danced under the stars. "More than I did yesterday, less than I will tomorrow." "That is the most romantic thing you have ever said," Rose replied, her eyes shining. "I have been saving it for a special occasion." They danced and laughed, surrounded by the family they had created, the life they had built. It was a perfect night, a celebration not just of their marriage but of everything they had accomplished together. The years continued their steady march. Yates was slowing down more noticeably now, his joints stiff from decades of hard physical labor. Rose had developed a cough that worried Alina, though her doctor daughter could not find anything seriously wrong, but they were content. They had lived full, rich lives. They had loved deeply, worked hard, built something lasting. Their children were thriving. Their grandchildren were growing up strong and capable. The ranch that had started with just Yates and Alina Ingram, then been rebuilt by Yates and Rose, was now a multi-generational family enterprise. In the spring of 1928, Yates fell ill. It started as a cold but developed into pneumonia. Despite Alina's best efforts and the care of the entire family, he continued to weaken. Rose never left his side, holding his hand, talking to him about their life together, all the moments big and small that had made up their years. "I am not afraid," Yates told her one afternoon. His voice was weak, but his eyes were clear. "I have had a good life, a wonderful life. You gave me that. We gave each other that," Rose corrected gently. "You remember what I told you the night I proposed, that I saw my future in your eyes that first day. I remember everything, my love. I was right. You were my future. Every good thing that came after you knocked on my door, it all came from that moment, that choice to let you in." He squeezed her hand weakly. "I do not regret a single day." "Neither do I," Rose said, tears streaming down her face. "Not one single day." Yates Ingram died peacefully the next morning, surrounded by his wife, his children, and his grandchildren. He was 76 years old. He was buried next to Alina Ingram on the hillside overlooking the valley, the two women who had loved him separated by a man who had loved them both. Rose grieved deeply, but she was not alone. Her children surrounded her with love and support. She continued living in the house she and Yates had shared, continuing their evening ritual of sitting on the porch, though now she sat alone, holding the empty space where his hand used to be. But she was not idle in her grief. She helped James continue to run the ranch. She spent time with her grandchildren, passing down stories of Yates, of Alina, of the early days of the Double I Ranch. She tended her garden, cooked family meals, remained a vital presence in all their lives. "How do you do it, Mother?" Sarah asked one day. "How do you keep going after losing Father?" "Because that is what he would want," Rose said simply. "We promised each other we would face everything together, but we also promised to keep living, keep building no matter what. He lived first without Alina, then with me. Now I live without him, but I am not really without him. He is in every corner of this ranch, in every one of our children and grandchildren, in every sunset over this land. He is still with me, just in a different way." Rose lived for 7 more years after Yates's death, remaining active and engaged with her family. She saw all of her grandchildren grow up, saw some of them marry and have children of their own. She was a matriarch in the truest sense, the heart of the family. In the summer of 1935, Rose Gardner Ingram died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 74. She was buried on the hillside next to Yates, their graves side by side, together even in death as they had been in life. The Double I Ranch continued to thrive under James's management and would eventually pass to his children and their children after them. The legacy that Yates and Rose had built together, born from a moment of desperation and hope on a hot Nevada day in 1883, lived on through generations. The house where Rose had first knocked on the door still stood, maintained by the family as a reminder of where it all began. The story of how Yates and Rose met, how they fell in love, how they built a life together from nothing but determination and faith, was passed down through the generations, becoming family legend, because theirs was a love story for the ages. A widowed cowboy, lost in grief, and a desperate woman running from her past, who found in each other not just salvation but partnership, passion, and purpose. They had faced droughts and financial struggles, threats from Rose's past and the challenges of building a family. They had worked side by side through scorching summers and bitter winters. They had celebrated triumphs and weathered losses, but through it all, they had chosen each other. Every single day, they had chosen each other. And that choice, repeated day after day, year after year, had built something remarkable. Not just a successful ranch, but a family, a legacy, a love story that would echo through the generations of Ingrams who came after them. On the hillside overlooking the valley, 3 simple headstones stood together. Eleanor Ingram, beloved wife, 1856-1878. Yates Ingram, loving husband and father, 1852. 1928. Rose Gardner Ingram, cherished wife, mother, and friend, 1861-1935. Below Rose's name, the family had added one more line at the request of her children. She knocked on his door seeking work. She found home, love, and forever. And every evening, as the sun set over the Double I Ranch, painting the Nevada sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, it seemed to shine especially bright on that hillside where 3 people rested together, their stories intertwined, their love eternal, their legacy living on in the land and the family they had built together. The end.